Why haven't it done it for during all those years? Because it is lies, like with Bucha. There's no one kidnapped children. Russia saves children from shelling, take them out from the zone of hostilities and take them to safe places. First of all, we mean orphans and children left unattended. Our country does everything it could to reunite children with their families. It's a successful process. For now, according to the Presidential Commissioner for Child's Rights, Maria Lvova-Belova, 101 children from 81 families reunited with their children or relatives who live in Ukraine or in third countries. 22 children from 15 families came back to Russia from Ukraine. The Russian side wants to responsibly approach and fulfilling all the reached agreements. The second round of negotiations in Istanbul finished, and the presidential office started to comment them, stressing and saying that Russia lacks aspiration for peace. Zelensky set the tone, who made offensive remarks about the Russian delegation as usual. Even last time, he was not happy with the Russian delegation and the outcomes and results proposed by the Russian delegates were okay for them. But they didn't learn anything. Now he started to comment on the Russian delegation. Sometimes they even threaten with new terror attacks in Russia. But our firm and constructive position rattled Andrei Yermak, who said, I quote, "Russians are doing everything they can to avoid a ceasefire and continue the war. New sanctions," he said, "are critically important right now. Rationality, according to him, is not something that applies to Russia." With such attitude, he went to the US yesterday on June the 3rd. He will try to persuade the Trump administration that a tougher approach to Russia is needed. This means that Kiev is still quite aggressive and is not inclined to look for sober solutions. I would like to remind the presidential office of in Ukraine and its foreign sponsors that we will respond in kind, and to talk to us from the position of force, let alone in terms of ultimatums, is something that we won't allow. The adequate understanding of the situation and responsibility for the future of the country is not something that applies to the Ukrainian Banderovich regime. On June the 3rd, the Investigative Committee of Russia ruled hideous crimes, as I said, explosions of bridges on the railways in the Bryansk and Kursk regions to be terror attacks. This is the essence of this regime. They say that we are ostensibly not rational, but they are terrorists. The official representative of the Investigative Committee, Svetlana Petrenko, noted that it is clear that the terrorists acted on the instructions of the Kiev regime and did everything they could so that more civilians were affected. That's their essence. The Investigative Committee, with the help of the Federal Security Service of Russia and Internal Ministry of Russia, continue the investigation. Actual perpetrators and organizers will be established and brought to justice. Civilians and civilian facilities of many Russian regions were under attack. On May 28th and 29th, the debris of Ukrainian drones damaged 3 houses in the town of Chekhov, the Moscow region, and 1 multi-story building in southeast of Moscow. On May 28th, in the Kursk region, following a detonation of a package. A 36-year-old local man was killed on May 29th. The emergency room of a hospital was damaged. On May 30th at night, a mass drone attack on Kursk took place. A 27-year-old driver was wounded on May 21st. Ukrainian drones attacked residential houses, 14 civilians wounded, including 4 children, in the village of Proletarsky, the Belgorod region. On June the 1st, the artillery shell hit a house. 1 woman was killed and a 12-year-old girl wounded. Overall in the region, at least 22 civilians were wounded. On May 30th, the Banderovics launched a targeted strike with drones on the city of Novodruzhsk, LPR. In the DPR, the shellings and drone attacks wounded at least 3 civilians. On May 29th, following drone attack against the city of Velashki, and a 85-year-old woman was wounded. 2 civilians were killed in the village of Novosbruyovka. On June the 1st, following shellings against villages of the Kherson regions, 2 civilians were wounded. On June the 2nd, a mass drone attack on energy facilities of Kherson and Zaporozhye regions. More than 700,000 Russians were left without electricity. The very same day, on June the 2nd, drone attacks against civilian vehicles in the Bryansk region left 2 civilians wounded. Now about cruelty that Banderovics showed the treatment of the residents of the Kursk region. As 80 years ago, during the Great Patriotic War, the Kursk region stood in the way of the Brown Plague. Back then, it was collaborations. Now we're talking about extremists. Residents of the Kursk region were subject to inhuman cruelty from neo-Nazis of Zelensky and foreign thugs. According to the Investigative Committee of Russia, 313 people were killed by them. 794 people were wounded, including 26 children. 576 residents of the Kursk region went missing, including 4 children. More than 54,000 children were recognized as victims of the Ukrainian incursion. Ukraine still has 34 residents of the Kursk region who were took away with force. And they were subject to beatings, humiliations, threats to be killed. Some of them were taken to prison. But what for? Simply for the fact that they were civilians in Russia. But all of them will be punished. All of the perpetrators will be punished. The Russian courts continue to pronounce verdicts to the Ukrainian neo-Nazi and mercenaries for their military and other crimes. Long sentences are given to Ukrainian militants: Roman Bura, 16 years; Sergei Palayda, 15 years; Alexander Maslenkov, 16 years; Vadim Razgon, 15 years; Vitaly Soloducha, 16 years; Dmitry Senkevich, 15 years; Nikolai Popovich, 16 years; Valery Misharsky, 17 years; Dmitry Muntan, 16 years; Maxim Levchenko, 16 years; Vladimir Nikolenko, 16 years, for the use of weapons against civilians and Russian soldiers, and for preventing evacuation of civilians in the Kursk region. 29 years and 4 months in prison were given to the Azov militant Dmitry Kucherava. In March 2022, he, together with other soldiers, shelled from a mortar the village of Berdansk, DPR. 14 years in prison. Their absentia were given to mercenaries from Great Britain and Sweden, Gary Bonin and Jonathan Quantz. Both of them are wanted internationally. The investigation established the Ukrainian commanders involved in the shellings of civilian facilities in the city of Lvov on May 22nd. It is the commander of 19 separate Brigade St. Barbara, Rostislav Karpusha.
The Investigative Committee of Russia will continue to collect evidence to hold accountable all those Ukrainian Nazis and foreign mercenaries that are responsible for war crimes and other crimes. And now a few words about who sponsors these crimes and who's behind all of these crimes. The European sponsors continue to incite the Kiev regime to further escalation of the conflict, and they're mobilizing new resources for that. On May 27th, the Council of the European Union approved the Security Action for Europe instrument that will provide up to 150 billion euros that will provide urgent and major investments into European and Ukrainian defense industries. May 26, the Dutch defense minister has informed about the transfer of the F-16 fighter jets that were promised to Kiev. They supplied 24 jets in total. On May 28, as a result of the meeting of defense ministers of Ukraine and Germany, it was agreed to provide a 5 billion euros military aid package that will be used for the production of long-range weapon systems, as well as for the supplies of Iris-T and its missiles. Earlier, European countries received energy resources from Russia at a just and profitable price in order to, we developed culture, humanitarian contacts, and we already can see the results of the policies pursued by those who are speaking about peace, but yet they're holding a knuckle just behind their back. The economy is collapsing in the eyes of surprised Germans, and the prospects of industry and science are quite blurred. Enterprises are leaving Germany, but Berlins have new friends, terrorists, in Kiev. The German Chancellor has committed to pay for the Starlink satellite systems, as well as to buy long-range weapon systems of Ukrainian origin. They also underscored that there is no longer any restrictions to the range of the weapons delivered to Ukraine. Only by that, they say, Ukraine can protect its own territory. How the terrorist gang of Zelensky is protecting their country by carrying out drone attacks on residential areas and civil facilities in Russia almost every day, well, everyone can see that. The unbridled supply of weapons to Kiev has a seamy and ugly side. There are more and more information that weapons have disappeared in the unknown direction. In particular, Americans have information that Kiev stole $12 billion from all the financial assistance provided by Washington to Kiev. They report that nearly 30% of the supplied weapons and military hardware hasn't reached the armed forces of Ukraine, and the most part of it has ended up in the hands of international criminal and extremist groups. And now a few words, I don't know even how to say it, luckily or unfortunately, I think everyone will have its own way to describe it. I'm talking about the so-called voluntary mobilization. Amidst the frantic attempts of the Bankovest Treaty to make up for the losses in the armed forces of Ukraine, the voluntary mobilization of the Ukrainian youth has failed, as it was stated by the deputy head of the office of the President of Ukraine, Pavel Polesa. 2 months after the launch of the enlistment program for Ukrainians aged 18 to 24, only 400 people applied. The young Ukrainians do not want to die for the junta. Do you know why? What is the reason for that? Because the Ukrainian government shows total disregard for them, whether they are alive or dead. When we offered the Kiev regime to take the bodies of their soldiers, they rejected even the fact that Russia offered them to take Ukrainian nationals, as if they were wriggling as snakes on a frying pan. And now we have stated that Russia is ready to transfer 6,000 bodies of fallen Ukrainian soldiers. What Zelensky said after that? He just denied them. He doesn't understand that Ukrainians are of no need to the Bankovest Treaty, whether they are dead or alive. Zelensky has put restrictions on 16-year-old teens to cross the border of Ukraine. 16-year-old teens. They are being expelled from the Ukrainian university, and therefore they have no right to draft deferment. How is it even possible? It's a true genocide, outright genocide, that is being organized by Zelensky and his gang against the Ukrainian population. As school students, these young Ukrainians can be sent to military draft officers this fall. The draft evaders, the number of them has increased manifold. Different estimates put that from January to May 2025, more than 25,000 Ukrainians deserted, while in 2024 there were 35,000 of them. Desertion and emigration has become common among Ukrainians. According to the Ukrainian Ministry of Economy, since the beginning of 2025, 104,000 persons escaped the country, and over the past 3 years, from 600,000 to 1 million Ukrainian nationals, able-bodied nationals, have left the country. They will refute the figures, but the real figures could be much higher. But we are using the tested statistics, the checked statistics. There is an apparent depopulation of Ukraine given the growing losses on the front line. The Ukraine's fight against its own history is taking more grotesque forms. You know that they have cancelled the Victory Day. They renamed all the towns and streets that had a connection to Russia. They demolished all the memorials, and they have declared war on Alexander Pushkin. And now it is time for the Children's Day. On May 30th, Zelensky has issued a decree to transfer the observance of the Children's Day from June 1st to November 20th. I just will explain that on June 1st, this day is observed in Russia, Belarus, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, China, Vietnam, Bulgaria, Latvia, Estonia, and many other countries. And Western Europe is predominantly observing this day as the World's Children's Day on November 20th, because on this day in 1959, the UN General Assembly adopted the Declaration on the Rights of the Child, and in 1989, it adopted the Convention on the Rights of the Child. By this action, the Kiev is trying to artificially shape a new reality in which Ukraine has nothing to do with Russia, but yet it has broad and strong ties with the West. At the same time, it doesn't matter on what day there's holidays observed. What's important is to really care about children, to protect their rights and interests, not to speculate on this topic without theatrically wailing about it at the various international fora. With what the Ukrainian regime is doing with an unhealthy regularity. What's the real care that the Kiev is showing for children is being clearly showed at the Alley of Angels in Donetsk. This is a memorial, a tragic memorial to children and teens who were visually killed by the Ukrainian Nazis since 2014 when they tried to crush Donbass. Well, they failed to do that. Some of the Ukrainians who were taken hostage with the tears in their eyes and standing on the knees begged for forgiveness in front of this memorial. All of that again shows that the objectives of the special military operation to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine and to eliminate threats emanating from its territory still hold true. And now I'll tell you about the lies spread by the Kiev regime about the so-called abducted children. This is the main topic to which international mass media turn the information to. It is the list that was provided by the Ukrainian side to Russia of the list of 339 Ukrainian children. And it was stated they lost contact with their parents. And now let's give a look at the situation in greater detail. I would just to draw your attention to what Mr. Medinsky said, but yet I would like to provide facts and quotes. First, I would like to say that previously Ukraine stated about 20,000 minors. You probably think that it was stated in a show or in social media, but yet on October 2nd, 2024, this figure was provided by the Ukrainian Commissioner for Human Rights in the Ukrainian Parliament, Dmitry Lubinets. He stated that there is 1.5 million of children that still could be deported by Russia. Later, the figure of 20,000 Ukrainian children has become the main element of the Ukrainian propaganda. In OSCE, representative of the Kiev regime, Yuri Vetrenko, provided information about 19,546 Ukrainian children. And this story was successfully sold to the West. And they didn't provide any details. 20,000 means 20,000. And this figure of 20,000 Ukrainian children could be found in the resolution of the European Parliament on the return of Ukrainian children forcibly transferred and deported by Russia that was approved on May 8, 2025. This resolution has a number, and we will put reference to it in the text of the briefing so that you will read all the lies spread by them. Second, is an obvious and public element of the Kiev's PR strategy. The issue of children was used by the Kiev in order to push through the International Criminal Court illegitimate decisions about the arrest warrants against our high-ranking officials, which has brought another discredit on the International Criminal Court and again demonstrates that the Kiev regime spreads lies. This story has been going on for years, and they have been using this topic at different international platforms. They have mentioned those 20,000 of Ukrainian children without providing any evidence, without providing any document. And again, this narrative is being successfully sold to the West. The Council of Europe has been working hard to create another pseudo-justice body, some kind of a special tribunal. They even appointed the former Icelandic official, Tordis Gylfadóttir, as the special envoy. Just can you imagine that? They invented it, a special envoy on the situation of children of Ukraine. They obviously has nothing to do. 20,000 of Ukrainian children, and that's the work for the special envoy of the Council of Europe. The Kiev regime had so many opportunities. Well, they stated about it 3 years ago, but they had so many options to provide some kind of a list, to provide names of children, to explain what children they were referring to all this time. They could do that through the mediators that are actively involved in various humanitarian processes. They could directly hand this list through Ukrainian embassy in any country, through an international organization. They have done nothing. But raising this issue at the peace negotiations in Istanbul by publicly raising this issue in all channels of information, including Western mass media, representatives of the Kiev administration were able to demonstrate the public profile of how they're caring for children. But in reality, they show total disregard for them as for other residents of former eastern regions of Ukraine and for all Ukrainian nationals. And I just would like to give you another quote. Zelensky, he said that in November 2021, and I quote, "Not all representatives of people are people. There are beings," he added. He stated that it was his opinion, and he was referring to residents of the East Ukraine. Today, Kiev authorities are instrumentalizing the narrative of Ukrainian children by turning it into a show. Who are these people? Are they caring for them by telling fairy tales about them, or are they beings and they are ready to do everything with them by sending them to suicidal storms, closing borders for them, drafting them to the battlefield, regardless of their age? And now I will tell you about the real work, because in reality, no child was abducted. Russia is getting children out of the shelling area and evacuates them to a safer place. The armed forces of Ukraine are regularly attacking places where children are gathered. For example, in September 2024, the armed forces of Ukraine attacked Kamenka-Dniprovskaya and Zaporozhskaya region. They attacked a school where there were 106 children. Luckily, there were no victims among them. On March 7th, 2025, the Ukrainian soldiers shelled a kindergarten in the frontal area of the Zaporozhskaya region. When they're launching missiles there, do they even think who these children are, who their parents are, what are their family names, what ethnicity they are? Well, they have no care. They don't care about it. Russia is saving orphans and minors who are left without parental care and the care of legal representatives. We act in the legal field in line with the international agreements, and this process is successful. But for some reason, the Kiev representatives forgot to mention it in Istanbul. I already mentioned that thanks to the 24/7 work of the Presidential Commissioner for Human Rights, Maria Lvova-Belova, 101 minors from 81 families reunited with their parents or blood relatives living in Ukraine or in third countries, and Russian children returned to our country again. The Kiev authorities forgot to mention that. I would like to underscore again that the Russian side intends to implement all the reached agreements in full responsibility and will give a closer look to the list of names that were handed by the Ukrainian side. It is likely yet that it will be found out again that persons placed on this list are not in Russia but yet in the West. Do you remember? It happened in April 2024. For those who forgot, I will explain. the head of the national police, Ivan Vygovsky, admitted that 161 minors that were earlier searched by Kiev in Russia were in fact in Germany. And just please, could you remind me if Ukraine filed a lawsuit against Germany for the fact that Ukrainian children ended up in Germany at that time? If something like that would happen again, I think it will become a shocking news for everyone who closely follows it. You know, I would like to finish this part by quoting the prominent Soviet writer and playwright Yuri German. In his novel about Peter the Great, he wrote, and I quote, "There is a scoundrel, a rascal, who will perform a mean act, and they will say that they are doing it for the sake of children." I think Yuri German could hardly imagine that after the end of the first quarter of the 21st century, the quote from his novel will portray so clearly and precisely those who are managing Ukraine today. It is time for Ukrainian junta to understand that to organize a pure stunt with the help of children is just cheap, immoral, and false.
We have drawn attention to President of Serbia, Alexander Vučić, in an interview to RTS channel, commenting on the published information by SVR, Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, on supplies of weapons to Kiev regime, despite the declared neutrality. He said that the military cooperation of Belgrade with foreign partners will be revised to identify fraudulent end-user certificates. We believe that the declared measures will allow to terminate the dubious export schemes and the leaking of military goods to wrong consignees. We hope that the measures will be sufficient and effective in order nothing to cast a shadow on the relations between our country, and I would add, not to cast a shadow on the sincere feelings of the Serbian people, the people that understands everything perfectly. We have received a whole number of questions on joint drills with Belarus will take place in September. It's formulated in this question. The countries that are rival to Russia have already launched a campaign to denigrate this, and Poland has announced response drills. And why the West is becoming a target of propaganda attacks by rivals? I will reply this question. During the previous briefing, against the background of growing tensions in Europe, NATO countries are growing provocative military drills near the Russian borders, and the major attention will be paid by the alliances paid to allied forces against Russia. 300,000 servicemen participate, and operational plans are made. New tactical schemes are tested. For example, last year, these maneuvers, more than 900,000 military personnel from all the alliance countries participated, and around 2,000 equipment units. And those were major drills since the Cold War, and the NATO commanders do not hide that such events are a rehearsal of the conflict, that is to say, with equal in force rival enemy. And contingents were moved and they were near the borders with Russia on the Danish island of Bornholm. Missiles of medium and small range were tested. We have already provided comments on that. Those are attacking the targets, forcing obstacles and many other drill tasks. It all is the growing risk of military incidents and destabilizing the security situation. We keep an eye on that. We follow that attentively in this context, and these drills and joint drills with Belarus, their main target is to strengthen the regional military group. It will be held on the testing grounds of Russia and Belarus. It is not against the third countries, and it will be security against aggression of rivals. And the CSTO military groups will also participate, and it will be also joint maneuvers, joint drills. Russia has taken a decision to cut the number of drills. It is nearly a double cut, and to transfer the major part from Belarus into the depth of the territory. It testifies of the readiness of our country to participate in negotiations to lower the tensions in the region. Unfortunately, NATO countries did not respond, as Warsaw is planning to hold new maneuvers in order to literally shift the blame. The blame to us, and to present Russia-Belarus drills as an attempt to prepare the, as they say, armed aggression, starting this armed aggression, and it's just absurdity, taking into account the facts I have cited. So let us now compare the defendant drills and our drills. It will be just certain specific categories in order to provide this qualification, in order not to leave any accusations against Russia and Belarus. So the Tom's Defender is held annually. The West is held once in 2 years. However, in 2025 it did not take place because of the decision of Moscow and Minsk. The duration of Defender is bigger. In Defender, it's 1932 countries, and the West, it's just 2 countries. Taking into account the CSTO drills as well, it's 5 countries. And here's just up to 5 countries. According to the scale, Defender is 25, 90,000 servicemen, and the West, it's 25,000, so it's many times smaller scale. It's 15 times smaller. So now the territorial scale. Defender, it will be It will target the Baltics and Europe. And the West, it's in the depth of the territory of Russia and Belarus. Now targeting, defend, I have already quoted, they formulate as equal rival as Russia against Russia. The West, it's defense. It's for the defense of the allied state. It's not aimed against any third country or group of countries. Do you need any conclusions? On the basis of those facts, I think everything is absolutely clear. Regarding the second item, in the question, many questions on informing, on the data. I think it will be commented by our Ministry of Defense, Russian Ministry of Defense. We move on. Just have a look. This hybrid war is actually according to some other rules. Someone says even without any rules. It just touches everything. It's conducted by the West against culture, against monuments, against stability, against development. And for some reasons, it's actually clear for what reason. We mean the rivalry of spirits, the force of spirit. It concerns everything. This is about Christianity and Orthodox beliefs. We now see what is happening in the Swedish town of Västerås, the situation around the Church of Our Lady of Kazan. Attempts to expropriate it from the Russian Orthodox community. Just imagine, the Church of Our Lady of Kazan. Sweden just wants to take it away from the members of the community. Maybe they do not just pay some taxes, or maybe they just use it not for some other reasons, for some other purposes. Maybe they are not in compliance with some rules. It can happen, but no, that's not the case. They just want to take away this church, the Church of Our Lady of Kazan, for security reasons. I would like to note that the land plot was legally acquired by the Russian Orthodox community in this town back in 2009. In agreement with the municipality, the church, the chapel and the guest house were erected on this area. This site has become a target for attacking by the media, Russophobic community, and not the Orthodox community. So who were they threatening? The climax of all that was just... so just have courage. As an observation point of Russian special services for the regional airport in the vicinity, it's just normal logics. When nationalism is attacking and a person is losing everything, his conscience, his mind, and critical thinking just becomes inadequate. I would like just to ask a question. In Sweden, are they aware of such notions as geolocation, internet maps, replicas of satellite data on the internet regarding the sites, that people use this information for various purposes, online web cameras? It's not been used with regard to the airport. It's just absurd, this story of building a church in order to use it as an observation site. If we have so many technical means, it's noteworthy that the municipal authorities that 3 years ago just nearly closed, you will now think a church, they were about to close an airport, but local residents just protected it. They were for its preservation, and now they are concerned about its security and inventing some stories about alleged threats to its security. They just need medical treatment. All those who invent that, who cannot ask direct questions, it's just absurd. Russophobic fantasies of provincial politicians, they're just beyond any limits. It's not the first time of actions against believers in Sweden. They regularly burn the Quran and desecrate other sacred writings. Now, under the pretext of those security reasons, the municipality just denies the Westeros Orthodox community their right for religious beliefs, and we just hope that this shameful practice, shameful for Sweden, will not be implemented. Actually, all people are different. In Sweden, there are good and bad people. I hope there are more good people, and those who are bad, they will become better. But like in any other country, but it's just such a shame for the entire Sweden. It's a horror they have invented. As if there is no one who can say that it's not worthy of a country that has maybe says it protects some high ideals, the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion. But there is also good news with the support of the Red Cross in Mongolia and with the support of the Russian embassy in Ulaanbaatar. There has been an expedition organized for the search of Russian soldiers who died in 1939 during the battle near the Khalkhin-Gol River. It is called the Khalkhin-Gol, Our Glory 2025. 30 specialists from 15 Russian regions and more than 130 citizens of Mongolia participated in that. Such a large-scale event has become possible due to agreements of the presidents of Russian Federation and Mongolia reached in Ulaanbaatar on the 3rd of September 2024 and in Moscow on the 7th of May this year. 41 soldier remains were found and 65 Red Army soldiers. The identities of the two of them have already been established with the assistance of criminalists from the Mongolian Ministry of Justice and Internal Affairs, and the data has already been passed to Tokyo, that is already conducting research works in Mongolia. And the second stage of expedition will be held in September this year. Now, good news from Kazakhstan. The opening of the alley of eternal friendship between Russia and the Republic of Kazakhstan. It has been done in pursuance of the agreements of the heads of the two states on the result of the state visit of President Vladimir Putin to Kazakhstan on the 27th of November 2024. It has become such a major event in the allied ties of our countries. It's just such a starting point in the relations of Russia and Kazakhstan. The ministers of culture of Russia and Kazakhstan, who made statements during the ceremony, they noted the alliance and common points in the relations of our country and the importance of this event for culture and art. And now the new section on the official website of Russian Foreign Ministry regarding the great victory and all that immense tremendous work carried out by our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and our colleagues in the Russian foreign missions and territorial bodies of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. regiments. They will be fixed forever on our ministry website and will become a source of truth. They cannot be distorted. There are actually 9 sections. Member acts, photo exhibitions, immortal regiments, media news, interview, video, articles by ambassadors, receptions, military memorial work, and also events of Russian foreign missions on the date of the Victory Day. And of course, we aim to preserve the input of the descendants of our heroes, the diplomats who honor their ancestors, who honor the feet of the Soviet people. And actually now they are fighting for historical memory on the international front line. We will continue to add the necessary information to this section, and we invite everyone to study the materials in this section. We have just posted more than 7,000 publications in different formats, from major articles to education videos dedicated to the victory and telling about the historical facts, and they have already been viewed and read by tens of millions of users around the world. Now, an important date, it was the 6th of June.
Marks this day, the whole world celebrates the Day of the Russian language. The artwork of this great poet and writer, who is considered for a reason a founder of the modern Russian language, combines the people's speech with the elegance and perfection of the high culture of thought. He managed to make his works universal. Thanks to that, even now, readers are touched by his works. The Russian language is one out of 6 official languages of the United Nations, and since the establishment of the UN, plays an important role in the development of the international dialogue. According to the decision of the UN Department for Public Information, since 2010, the Day of the Russian Language is celebrated annually within the program of the development of language and cultural diversity. The Russian language makes targeted efforts to protect and support the Russian language in the world. Together with partners, we make steps to launch the work of the International Organization of the Russian Language, established in 2023 on the initiative of the President of Kazakhstan. Outside Russia, it is a truly people's holiday. Our like-minded people abroad hold events and actions aimed at underlining the role of the Russian language in their own life and in the global development. On the premises of schools, universities, cultural centers, there's competitions, readings, festivals, Olympiads, and high interest is drawn to large-scale events on the Day of the Russian Language at the platforms of international organizations like the UN, UNESCO, and those organized by Russian missions in New York and Paris. There's an exhibition, the Russian alphabet, in the pictures of Marina Khankova. We'll talk about it in greater detail in the text of our briefing. It will include links. We'll talk about more events to celebrate this holiday, the official accounts of Russia's foreign ministry. To learn more and to find more interesting materials, it is possible on the information service window to Russia. I cannot but note that today the Kiev, Chisinau regimes, authorities of a number of Western countries try to destroy the Russian language, culture, and everything Russian. Let's take Ukraine. After coup d'etat in 2014 that was organized from the outside, the Kiev regime have been pursuing a policy on total derussification under the pretense of decommunization. They came up with this term. Those are not only restrictions, it's a full-fledged war. They barbarically banned the Russian language in the communication between people, in schools, on the streets. They prohibit books, burn them down. The world saw something similar in the first half of the 20th century in Europe. Do you remember it? It was called Nazism. The Kiev regime, under the leadership of Western masters, show the world their true colors. The most terrible thing is that those who talk about human rights and values, now they talk about it less, to say the truth. They even start to mention less the values. You see the collapse in the West. However, they encouraged all this impunity. They turn a blind eye on these barbaric neo-Nazi actions. They contribute to the Russophobe hysteria in their own countries, and they made up reasons like security or political correctness. They ban Russian schools, persecute Russian media and cultural centers. Human rights for the West is only for a few. And the Russian language and its native speakers are out of law. The protection of the Russian language is not only a question of culture. It's the issue of preserving identity of millions of people. What are we to do with those who have been creating the richness of the culture of our country for centuries? A lot of Russian compatriots live all over the world, and Russian is native for them. It's the issue of responding to Nazism, to protecting our meanings and values. We will do everything we can to inform the whole world about the facts, to demand from the international organizations to give evaluations on this genocide. And we have a language to speak, and to speak beautifully. We announced, as you know, the Nizhny Novgorod is hosting on May 5th, 6th a global digital forum. It will be participated by more than 2,000 foreign guests. I would like to announce a section that our department is in charge of. It is called the Responsible Fact-Checking in the Era of Post-Truth, New Possibilities for Cooperation. The discussion will be participated by foreign journalists and experts from Turkey, France and Ireland. In November last year, Moscow hosted the second International Forum Dialogue about Fakes 2.0, organized by NGO Dialogue Regions with the support of the Foreign Ministry of Russia. The key event of the forum was the presentation of the concept of the International Association on Fact-Checking, including the Code of Responsible Fact-Checking. These global initiatives emerged as a response to never-ending flow of fakes, disinformation campaigns, and pseudo fact-checking promoted by the West. Today, it includes more than 55 experts from 20 countries. We hope that the Global Digital Forum will become annual and will give impetus to establish and deepen international cooperation in this sphere. I'm ready to take your questions. Please, is the International Affairs Journal with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, said that the idea of the European Commission to ban Russian energy raw materials to the EU damaging. What can you say about it? We saw those quotes during the conference of conservative political forces on May 29th in Hungary. The president of Slovakia, criticized the economical damaging EU strategies, like banning energy supplies from Russia. I think this is one more reason showing that everything is timely. There's nothing surprising. Russia ensures 2/3 of gas demands, and it ensures 90% of oil, 100% its nuclear power. Slovakia will lose about 500 million euros. 2/3 of electricity in Slovakia is produced by 2 NPPs in Slovakia, as you know, and the nuclear energy is supplied there by the Russian company. The European Commission essentially encourages Slovakia to be in an energy collapse. And all of this is done under the mottos of human rights, development of the European continent, and a brighter future. This is the aspiration to harm everyone, Russia, not only Russia. They disregard the interests of their own citizens, let alone the citizens of Slovakia. It's just another example. One more question, Madam Zakharova. What can you say about a new round of tensions between officials in Paris and the French Polynesia in terms of decolonization? As I understand, we're talking about the special meeting of the UN Committee on Decolonization that took place on May 21st to 23rd. The representatives of Polynesia put forward an initiative to host the regional meeting of the special committee in 2027, and in the UNJ resolution of May 17, 2013, confirms the right of the people of the archipelago for self-determination and independence. However, Paris ignores this. Paris lives on its own rules. There is no preparedness to move towards the political forces in the French Polynesia who wants to hold a referendum on self-determination. France only speaks about human rights. They mention human rights and international law and freedom, but in reality there's a real opportunity and even necessity to implement those things because the locals want it. But now the French authorities refuse to cooperate on decolonization. They pretend that this body is not there in the UN system. And as to the UNJ resolution, they simply disregard it. This is the true attitude of France to the international law. When they want, they interpret it as they wish. They show double standards that are a part of the rules-based world order. If we look at what is going on, France, more and more often the situation comes to the population that is not content. 1 year ago, there were mass protests in the New Caledonia. Then there was a situation on Martinica with protests caused by social and economic issues. They even turned into clashes with the police. All of these protests were suppressed. Sometimes I think about Paris, and there's a feeling that they do not see their own problems. As to the French Polynesia, along the problems that it faces, we cannot but remember tragic pages of its history as a part of the French Republic. These islands, for 30 years, were the base for nuclear tests of France. Those who know this place, they know it not because it's a paradise for tourists, but because of the news of geopolitical and military character. As to the consequences of these tests, this is an issue for locals, not only for environmental experts, but for everyone. And Paris do not want to answer those issues and questions. Paris should refuse the colonial approach to their own territories before commenting on situation in other places. All these issues has international and local dimensions, and these problems must be settled. That's what they should think about. Thanks to you. Is Rita with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Rita is here. I have a question that you partly touched upon in at the beginning of the briefing. This is a question about attacks on Russian air bases and infrastructure facilities that took place during the weekend. Were the West involved in this? Probably you can name some certain countries. What will be Russia's response to this? I paid some attention to this at the beginning. The question is very interesting, but in this particular case, on this particular bridge, or this train, this ambulance were blown up or attacked, is the West to blame for this or not? the West is involved into terror activities of the Kiev regime. Let's look globally how. First, the Western countries, no matter how you call them, NATO countries, NATO-centered countries, the collective West, it's up to you. But to understand who we're talking about, they supply weapons for this, to commit those terror attacks. There are no restrictions. They do not introduce them. And whether it is legally, it is legal, and they have stopped to answer those questions. They provide coordinates because only Western countries have capabilities for this, or companies that are affiliated with Western countries and governments. No terror attack that it is absolutely clear, because of facts, can be called only as a terror attack has never been condemned by anyone. No one even tried to say a word to the Kiev regime because of it officially. And I remember the words about Paris when there was a terror attack about terror attack against a media outlet. There were a lot condemned that terrorism, and that it cannot go on like this. And a foreign minister joined in and said that journalists cannot be subject to terror attacks. But did Paris say anything about the killings of journalists by the Kiev regime? No, nor individually or at any platforms. They could have told within their international commitments, but no. The West provides support and politically encourage the Kiev regime for such steps. After every get-together when Macron comes to, there is a massive attack on civilian facilities. This just shows that the West directly and or indirectly participate or involved in these terror attacks. And I mean those terror attacks that are committed against Russian civilians, people, journalists, Russian infrastructure.
Спасибо вам большое.
Thank you very much. Thank you. RIA Novosti, please. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. RIA Novosti, we have 3 questions, if you allow. First, the German authorities have extended the permanent stay for the correspondent of RIA Novosti. What are your comments about that? I just wouldn't like to dwell into the history of the question, but today, in the past month even, it's not RIA Novosti that is being pressurized and discriminated by the German authorities. Earlier we haven't commented about it. The same situations is being developed with regard to journalists of Channel 1. They're also operating in Germany. When it became clear that it's not a mere coincidence, it's not just a technical problem, it's a clearly policy being systematically pursued by the German authorities with regard to Russian journalists in order to prevent the normal operations, we have decided to take measures in response, symmetric measures. Well, it doesn't matter, but measures in response will be taken with regard to German journalists that are credited in Russia and that are working in Russia. We kindly ask the German embassy to convey our words to Berlin and to notify the German Society of Journalists that Moscow is taking and will take measures in response with regard to German journalists. So when these measures are taken, no one in Berlin and in other cities of Germany, that the poor German journalists have faced unjustified actions of Russia. We have proposed so many ways to solve the situation, but they didn't help. And right now we are developing responsive measures that will be developed and implemented quickly. We wouldn't like Germany to behave as if they weren't warned about it. And second, if you allow, on January 1st, the Russian labor legislation was amended. In particular, it is about the work of foreign companies and representative offices with regard to the ability to hire Russian nationals and nationals of third countries. Could you please elucidate on these amendments? It is true that in line with the articles of the Labor Code of the Russian Federation, we will provide all the details in the text version of the briefing. These amendments were made this year in line with the federal law on December 26, 2024, on making changes to the Labor Code of the Russian Federation. It defines the particularities of hiring workers that will be placed in diplomatic offices and consular offices of foreign states working in Russia, as well as international organizations and their representative offices. And these measures are also applied to the diplomatic agents, consular officials, and members of their families that are working with them in Russia. In order to implement these amendments, the Russian Ministry of Justice has registered the order of the Russian Ministry number 6460, which defines the main administration for the service to the diplomatic corps working under the jurisdiction of the Russian Foreign Ministry as the designated body that will carry out activities on hiring workers to these foreign organizations. So personnel can only be hired if a contract is signed between the main administration of the service to the diplomatic corps and the foreign representative office. In this regard, the foreign officers, representation offices and missions will have to bring into compliance their work to hire Russian nationals and nationals of the third countries. They need to re-register their contracts with the already hired workers in line with the adopted amendments. In order to hire Russian nationals and nationals of the third countries, foreign companies and organizations need to contact the branch office of the main administration to the service of the diplomatic corps in Predkadri enterprise, to be exact. And the third question, if you allow, it has been 3 years since Nord Stream pipelines were detonated. As you have commented at numerous briefings, investigation is not being carried out in most countries, or it is just a sham investigation. And recently, von der Leyen and the Chancellor of Germany, Merz, made new statements about that. What's the opposition on that? You know, it is a terrible story. Earlier they sanctioned our country, later they have imposed secondary sanctions on those who is working with our country, and now they are imposing sanctions on their nationals, on their economic operators, and they are doing it in a cynical way. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and Chancellor of Germany, Merz, when they have expressed their intention to adopt a new package of sanctions against Russia, they now want to ban the repairs and the further use of the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 so that these gas pipelines cannot be used in the future. It is so horrible. I'm not just explaining why these pipelines matter, but first, German businesses and technologies were used there. We are talking about German economic operators, and now they forbid them to carry out all the necessary repair and maintenance works of what they created. It wasn't created by von der Leyen and Merz. It was created by ordinary German people with their investments, with their aspirations. Second, just imagine, there were explosions on the Nord Stream 1 and 2, and there was an environmental disaster. Just imagine what would happen with environment and with security. Again, you wouldn't allow to do anything because you will face sanctions. You know, I just wanted to say that I think it's a prerequisite or the last step towards starting to forbid the treatment of officials and workers who were involved in creating the Nord Stream pipelines, or to forbid the education for their children. Just imagine your father worked on the Nord Stream pipelines and your children need to wear the special insignia and should be placed in classrooms on the last table to prevent their education. I cannot even comment that. However, there is another question which bothers my mind. It inflicts an economic damage to Germany and to the European Union in general. But it is a blatant problem with logic, misanthropic logic, because if they're following this logic, they're just hating humanity in general. I have a second question, but I still want to ask, what's going on with the investigation? They are rubber stamping sanctions so easily, but what's going on with the investigation? I recall we provided all the details and comments on the investigation in April 2025. The prosecutor services of Sweden and later the police of Denmark have closed investigations in February 2024, citing the lack of evidence. Well, it's just a mere pipeline and it detonated. That's just not important for Northern European countries. And in September 2024, then Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, stated that we wanted to hold accountable those who is responsible for that if we're able to catch them. You can count on that. He promised it to German nationals, and he wasn't re-elected after that. At that time, he qualified the detonation of the gas pipelines as an act of terrorism, and he called on security services and Prosecutor General's office to carry out investigation without taking into account interests of somebody. Again, it was stated by Olaf Scholz in September 2024. It is 3 months left before September 2025. So many time has passed since they promised to carry out investigation. It is the same situation as it was with the Skripal's case, with the Novichok use and the poisonings in Amesbury's and Salisbury's. Do they even understand what is going on there in their countries? Do you have any more questions? I hope you don't have a fourth question. We don't have a fourth question, to be honest. Well, you will have time to ask it next time. Lenta.ru, please. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. Ms. Zakharova, could you please a statement made by Keir Starmer that the United Kingdom is moving to a war-ready regime, and he explained it with the threat posed by Russia. Well, there is nothing new taking into account the logic that is being pursued by the Downing Street over the past years, but they need to specify that they are moving to this regime. It's not just because someone wants to attack them, it is because they are escalating tensions in Europe. And they are doing that not only in Europe, they are doing that all over the world over the past 25 years. They have been attacking and bombing so many countries when they were part of so many different international coalitions. These are just their plans to attack any country, you name it. All the talks that is connected to the risks and threats posed by Russia, it doesn't hold any water. I just explained that when the updated strategic defense review was presented, Keir Starmer noted the need for the country to move to the war action preparedness, and he motivated it with the more serious, unpredictable, and direct challenges and threats, and he even compared this situation with the Cold War era. And in this context, he noted that in particular the war in Europe, new nuclear risks, and everyday cyber attacks and aggressive behavior in the waters and the airspace of the Great Britain. By the way, I would like to notice that the Great Britain was involved in the act of terrorism in the waters of the Black Sea, which was repeatedly stated by Russia. And the Great Britain participated in this illegal act of terrorism, and the Great Britain is providing the terrorist Kiev regime with weapons and all the necessary information so that the Kiev regime could carry out acts of terrorism. And at the same time, the Great Britain feels that somebody is going to attack it. And Russia is qualified as a direct and real threat to London and to its allies due to the large-scale invasion in Ukraine, as they write, which clearly demonstrates the intention of Russia to use military force to achieve its geopolitical goals, to reinstate its sphere of influence in its closest neighborhood, and to destroy the international world order. The Great Britain is speaking about the international world order that bombed Iraq, that attacked as part of the NATO coalition, they attacked Yugoslavia. Great Britain is talking about world order. How interesting. Moreover, before the special military operation was launched, there were 7 years of our appeals to build peace, and we did our utmost in order to prevent a further escalation. But Great Britain did its best to resume this escalation by banning Kiev to have negotiations with Russia in spring 2022. So everything they write in their document is false and not true. We should know that it's very important to understand that apart from Russia, they mention China, which according to London presents, which is characterized by London not as a threat, but as a complex and permanent challenge to what? To British ambitions, to their constant wish to hold global dominance. They didn't specify, and they also mention Iran and the DPRK that are called as regional problem makers. Great Britain has nothing to do with the region where these countries are placed, but yet they believe that they have the right to make their assessments about the region. It's their typical approach to besmirch, to say rude statements without providing any information, and to do their dirty work. We have always been hearing the voice of London in inciting NATO countries and countries of the Western Europe to take another package of anti-Russian sanctions. I believe that this concentrated and special demonstration of alarmism by Keir Starmer is the desire of the Labour government to hide their own miscalculations. It's a pure stunt, and their desire to justify the growing budgetary spending on military affairs and to increase the appeal of their party in the eyes of the population, and to add to the destabilization in Europe so that they wouldn't be seen in a bad way. It is obvious that Keir Starmer and its followers do not give priority to the prosperity and living standards of the ordinary British people, and their witch hunt and to pin peoples one against each other is a typical trait of the British political establishment. It is obvious that they want to create and sow another conflict in Europe. Thank you for your detailed commentary, and if you allow, I have another question for you. Following Russia-Ukraine negotiations in Istanbul, President Erdogan offered to have a summit meeting between the leaders of Russia, US, and Ukraine. What is the position of the Russian Foreign Ministry to the prospect of holding a trilateral meeting in this format? Could you please repeat your question? Because as far as I understood, you were talking about the summit. President Erdogan, I would like to underscore that this is the question that should be referred to the executive office of the Russian president, because this information is being distributed through their channels. Voice of the Fatherland, please.
Voice of the Fatherland, are you with us? Yes, hello, we're here. Madam Zakharova, Vladimir Putin has recently signed a decree on the detriment done by Western countries and foreign actors to the Russian Federation. Does the Foreign Ministry has specific information about this harm done? I would like to highlight that in this decree, in this document signed in May this year, there is an order to the prosecution authorities to conduct their activities. It's the scope of responsibility of the prosecution authorities, and the responsible body is the Prosecutor General's Office of Russia. And it's about monitoring, establishing monitoring and creating interaction with other state bodies before the 19th of June 2025. If after receiving a reply from them, you will need some details from us, we will respond to your question. Now our second question. The role of the UN in the settlement of the Ukrainian crisis, the growth in UN representatives, number of missions, maybe UN peacekeepers and troops on the territory of Ukraine. Is it to be estimated at as a negative development? So as we have mentioned, As I have mentioned, there are mechanisms and steps, some of them taken by the Security Council, some of them additionally agreed. It has all been documented, but I repeat, it's not the UN Secretaries that make such decisions. It's member countries that allow the Secretariat to implement them. So do not think that some statements by the Secretary General will be made. We will just be notified. No, it's just the adoption will be done by member countries in a working order, and it has no relation to Ukraine at all. I'm just describing the procedure to you, and there is no basis to comment what you have mentioned in the context of Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you. Is Ukraine.ru with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova, Anna Cherkasova, Ukraine.ru outlet. How would you comment the new strategic document in the context of the Black Sea initiative? Yes, actually, it is to become the basis of some strategy with regard to the Black Sea region. Of course, it's a strange document because everything is shocking there, including its tone, because Brussels, maybe because it has too many political ambitions, maybe some geopolitical emotions that prevail there that should not be demonstrated now in some manner. Maybe they're just not aware, they do not know the geographical realities. It's my guess, taking into account the level of those European officials. So the strategic document adopted in Brussels, that is to determine the policy, further policy in the Black Sea region. I just remember very well Liz Truss. Back then she was Foreign Secretary in the UK. She said it's more convenient for them just to take the fleet to the Baltics via the Black Sea. Back then it has become clear that something went wrong in their noble family. You just needed to have a look at the map and see where the seas are situated. Now I have a feeling that they are lacking professionalism in their approach. The sea states, EU candidates for the EU accession, they just face this fact. They did not participate in its development. Now let us see what is written there. The priority of Brussels is to isolate this region from Russia. I beg your pardon, it's just insane. Because Russia has a many centuries status of the Black Sea powerhouse. Of course, you can listen to people like Liz Truss, who were in Great Britain, and thinks that it's more convenient to transport the fleet to the Baltics that way, but it's just a geopolitical nonsense. That's what they're talking there. It's just an attempt to turn the Black Sea into a territory of rivalry imposed by the European Union to the Russian Federation. I have just replied, answered a question about Keir Starmer statements about the necessity to prepare for the war. So they have just started this aggressive stage, this painful stage. They want to start some new story on the European continent. It's just some insane thoughts. It's provoked by their mad thoughts. So it's just scary, this lack of knowledge. Who prepared that report? Because before that it was prepared by Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas, who are just proactive in the preparation of the region for war confrontation through the growth of the irrelevant infrastructure, military patrolling, NATO strengthening, and new hysteria due to so-called hybrid threats, risks, and so on. Against this background, the speculations about the importance of the Black Sea region as another link between the European Union and the Caucasus and Central Asia states, it just sounds hypocritical, because you are talking about friendship, but for that you need to isolate the state that has been there for centuries by international law, and with its history it has earned its right to be a great Black Sea powerhouse. You just want to cross that out from the from international agenda. What peace and stability and development are you talking about then? Actually, Brussels, I think it's more interested not in infrastructure and transport development in the region, but to bypass Russia in its logistics routes in order to grow its presence, its military presence, among other things, in the Black Sea. Under the pretext of trade navigation, they have already learned to destroy the EU economy. Now they have started those infrastructure projects for the purposes of regional destabilization. Have they asked anyone among public experts, their own community? I mean, maybe some questionnaire, referendum in those countries that allegedly represent Kallas and Ursula von der Leyen. It's just some speculations that are developed separately from the interests of the peoples of those countries. I think that the Black Sea states that have their own policy, not dictated by the EU, they are well aware about the risks of such irresponsible policy that Brussels Euro officials are trying to impose. It's better to say bureaucrats. Now, please allow me one more question. You have already mentioned the Kiev regime trying to disrupt negotiations, but many experts think that we have chosen the tactics of small steps. But do you think it yields some hope that we will ultimately reach some important agreements where in negotiations with Ukraine? But do you think those negotiations are not significant while they are significant? The first round, it was 1,000 people from each side returning, coming back home. I'm just surprised about those disgusted comments in Western media. So actually those 1,000 people from each side detained. The exchange has been implemented, actually, and it's absolutely unconstructive, softly speaking, and terrorist nature of the Kiev regime is just a colossal result. If we actually talk about the interests of people, of course we would like these to end as soon as possible. It's about the hopes and aspirations of our country more than anyone else, because Our country has been trying to reach the entire global community for 7 years, saying that it's necessary to implement the Minsk agreements that were the real actual plan to settle this Ukrainian situation. But now you observe this destructive, absolutely mad stance by Bankova government. It had just been 2 hours before the start of negotiations. On Bankova, there was a hysteria that they have sent wrong people, that we will not talk to them. You have not demonstrated something. It's just a new hysteria every time. In these conditions, we just need to highly assess, positively assess the achievements of those negotiations. Now they cannot say anything positive on Bankova. Just start the implementation of those agreements. Instead, there are just accusations, some other new lies. And other humiliations, and just do not forget the circumstances. Thank you. Thank you. Is Komsomolskaya Pravda with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. I have one question. Yesterday, the Moldova Foreign Ministry recommended its citizens to abstain from traveling to Russia in order to avoid the arbitrary measures, arbitrary detentions. How would you comment on that? If you allow me, I would start in the context of Moldova from other issue. On the 3rd of June, we witnessed the death of our beloved composer, wonderful author, wonderful music for famous films. He passed away. He was 88 years old, this people's artist of the Soviet Union. Eugene Doga is an outstanding figure in the history of Soviet, Russia, and of course Moldovan music culture. His works, they have received global recognition, and his input is immense. His music sounded in cinema, in theater, and during Olympic ceremonies in Moscow and Sochi, at major concert venues of our country and abroad. He was the author of dozens of orchestral and chamber works. His waltz, My Affectionate and Gentle Beast, from a hunting accident film, it is among the world's musical heritage. Since 1998, Eugene Doga was a citizen of the Russian Federation. He visited Moscow many times. He lived in Moscow for long periods. He underlined his links with Russia. So just let me quote one of his interviews. The majority of my works, Eugene Doga says, were written in Russia. Russian musical culture has an immense classical heritage, and the variety of traditions have a great experience, great performance experience, and they have been formed under the influence of this immensely rich culture. It has become a nourishing source for my works for my entire life, and has become part of my ethnical culture. This combination gives my music its special nature and makes it clear for a wider audience. These words, they just do not characterize only his works and his traditions, but those words should be left in the pages of modern history, in the articles of our modern interactive school book, where they write about the cancellation of Russian culture, Russophobia, some Nuremberg ambitions to stifle the national identity, something like that, some accusations made against our country, some mad statements. So just have a look. This quotation is just the essence of what Russia is stating, on the basis of what it lives. It's just enriching the ethnical diversity of those who have some contact with the culture of Russia. As you know, Vladimir Putin expressed his condolences to the relatives of the composer. He said that the works of Eugene Doga, his enlightenment and charity activities are a bright page of our national culture. Yes, we have lost an outstanding figure, cultural figure, a real master whose works have become a part of our cultural space. We will never lose him as a person, as a creator of immortal works, immortal works. In the last years of his life, some politicians who just lack dignity, they just tried to make him promote some Russophobic ideas, but we will remember his input to the Russian culture, and we will just not remember him. We will just live with this music because it is in the hearts of many people and of course of many Russians. Why have I started with that? Because it should necessarily be mentioned. It's our common loss and pain, but it's our common achievement that those people have been such outstanding creators in our culture. And now your question, just think about it. The Moldovan authorities, they just ban, or under some false pretext, they just find some pretexts and just try to talk their own citizens from travels to Russia, just under the pretext of some alleged arbitrary actions by Russian authorities.
In diplomatic terms, it's a set of ungrounded statements not backed by facts. This is nonsense. The Moldovan authorities, following suit, their Western curators try to accuse Russia in what they are doing, not us. We don't do this. The officials in Chisinau say that Moldovans that come to Russia may face the legal arbitrary actions from the Russian authorities. In practice, everything is vice versa. It is Russians who come to Moldova faced in the airport of Chisinau with open discrimination. Even some people of Moldova and representatives of other ethnicities who live there with their Moldovan passport are discriminated against by the authorities. They are subject of additional checks. They and their children are stripped of basic conditions, food, water, possibility to connect with the world, and embassies of Russian mission, Russian embassy there are not granted the access to compatriots. This contradicts the Convention on Consulate Relations. This is characteristic of the Chisinau regime. Independent, first of all, Russian-speaking media are closed down under made-up pretenses. Since February 2022, 18 TV channels and more than 60 internet resources were closed down. There is more pressure on political opponents. The tax service of Moldova blocked assets of the head of Gagauzia, Evgenia Gutsul, and a number of oppositions. There are attempts to ban Evgenia Gutsul from possibility to fulfill her her work. It was not Russia who did not give people in Moldova to vote. Remember the lines that we had here in Russia. But it was the Moldovan authorities who did not give this opportunity to their own citizens. People want to have this right to vote. It's granted them by the Constitution. But people who come to Russia from Moldova, they are interesting and they are always welcome here. Russia has become a place where they studied, worked, or arrested. And this warning, I'm sure, it was laughed off in Moldova because a lot of people from Moldova come to Russia. Indeed, we have our own requirements, customs, and border checks, and they're effective, and they apply to not only to the people from Moldova, but every country has such rules. But they came up with the idea that Moldovans cannot enter Russia freely is absurd. Moldovans, those who visit Russia or live in Russia, or who have some friends and relatives in Russia, won't allow Chisinau to strip them of huge possibilities that cooperation with Russia opens for them. I would like to note that Russia's MFA on April 28 sent a note to proposing to hold bilateral consultations on a set of issues to do with border transition of the countries of the citizens of the countries. The consultations now will give an opportunity to discuss mutual problems, express criticism, but the Moldovan side did not respond to it. That is it. Citizens of Moldova should know what Sandu thinks about them. When we propose to go through the concerns or issues at the expert level, there is nothing. Probably now they are going to write something back, but we haven't heard from them since. Is Sinhua with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Sinhua Agency. I have the following question. Recently, Russia started to show an animation film, Nezha, the Devil Boy Conquers the Dragon King. Do you plan to watch this film? Recently, Russia and China has been cooperating closely in cinema industry. What role, in your opinion, belongs to the cooperation in filmmaking for cooperation, mutual understanding between the countries? As you said, Russia-China cooperation in filmmaking has been developing gradually and dynamically. This track is in the focus of attention of our leaders. During the BRICS summit in Kazan, our heads of state talked about the development of joint filmmaking. During the official visit of China's President Xi Jinping to Moscow, the relevant agencies signed action plan until 2030. This document provides for a number of projects and measures to promote relevant contacts. And in early May, the delegation of filmmaking industry from China came to Russia. there have been 18th meeting of subcommission on cooperation in the filmmaking under the Russia-China Commission on Humanitarian Cooperation in May in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Kazan. Hosted Festival of Chinese films. The Festival of Russian Films has been preparing in China. It is scheduled to take place in September. We welcome success of our Chinese partners in this sphere. I'm going to watch if I have time for this, and I'm sure that this animation film is of high quality. And I also remember traditional cartoons in China, and I like very much old Chinese cartoons about this character, and this develops Chinese cartoons. I always watched them in pleasure when I was a child, so I think I will be glad if I watch it. I'll tell you my opinion after I watch it, and I hope that our people will like it too. I think we have to facilitate the development of filmmaking in China, given the traditions our countries have. We already have a film project scheduled. It's a very important factor to strengthen, in general, mutual understanding and friendship between our countries. I'll tell you more. This is a very good and very needed contribution to the world culture and art. Thanks to you. Is the China Media Corporation with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We had two questions, but you answered one of them. So I'll ask you the second. Recently, the American side accused China in violating the consensus reached in China-American negotiations in Geneva. China refuses these accusations, and the American side introduced restrictions against China. How can you evaluate this kind of behavior? Many times during briefings and in statements, we have noted illegitimate and discrimination character of bans introduced by Washington all over the world, including against China. When such differences occur between major economics of the world, and it is a part of a strategy based on force. This has a lot of risks for global trade and economic relations, and creates conditions for economic recession. There is risk for China students. Some visas have been revoked for Chinese students. It's a new restriction. It's not a local solution. It's another measure in the general picture of curbing China from the US. As far as I know, probably you can tell more details. The share of Chinese specialists in American high technology is huge. They asked them to come to the US. They promised prospects and so on, but that happened, something like this happens, and they're segregated against. You know, I have a certain proposal to Chinese students. Don't get disappointed. Look at the Russian education. It is of high quality and very competitive in the world education. The Chinese students are received by universities both in capital and in other cities and in all regions of our country. There are a lot of universities that can be interesting for them. And the knowledge that the Chinese specialists received there were used efficiently. They reached a lot in various spheres. So don't you worry and look for alternatives. We are prepared. Thank you, Madam Zakharova. Thanks to you. Is Vestia with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We have 3 questions. First, how can you comment on the Childman Prize awarded to Ursula von der Leyen on May 29th? I only can say that earlier, in recent years, the nominees included Macron and Zelensky. When teachers or medical workers want to continue the line of words, well, then Ursula von der Leyen works perfectly here. This award used to be given to Mitterrand or Helmut Kohl, and it was clear why they received this award. But what did Zelensky do? He destroyed its own story, history, country, citizens. What did Tikhanovskaya did? She traveled around countries, received support and money from them, and she spread ideas that are written for her from some other people. I'm not even going to talk about Macron. It would be a long speech. But Ursula von der Leyen, what did she do? She procured vaccines worth billions of euros. She couldn't explain and why and how she did it, and vaccines, they just disappeared, they were destroyed. The low level of EU and NATO leaders, and in this context I mean world leaders, low professional, we can see low professional qualities among them. The court ruled the actions of Ursula von der Leyen illegitimate. But who's next? Somebody infamous, probably. The next question. What can you say about the outcomes of the presidential elections in Poland? We can see how for many years Russophobia was being spread there. And this became the uniting topic for Polish political elites. I mean, the anti-Russian consensus. Whoever won the presidential elections in this country, we don't see prospect for normalization of bilateral relations between our country until officials in Warsaw refuses the implementation of hostile towards Russia policies. The President Nawrocki distinguished himself only by the fact that he actively participated in taking down of memorials to Soviet liberators. And one more question: how do you evaluate the second round of negotiations in Istanbul? What are further prospects for that? We talked about it today already. There's a team who deals with this, and we will keep you informed. Thanks to you. Is news.ru with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. News.ru information portal. We have only one question. Can you comment on the election of the former Foreign Minister of Germany, Annalena Baerbock, as the president of the 80th session of the UNGA? The deputy permanent representative of Russia to the UN, Polanski, said that Baerbock received only 167 votes. It's not enough. Baerbock is a scandalous person. She had a scandalous career in her own country. Scandalous story. The story is scandalous, and she started her work at the UN with it. What the scandal was caused by? Well, sometimes by her not really successful career, but in her case, by the lack of professional experience and understanding of the sphere she's not only working, but essentially she heads. Do you remember how her work at the Foreign Ministry of Germany collapsed? People in Germany recognized that it was a shame. But so it's not surprising. The whole Germany thinks where she can be sent, but in order not to think about her. It's what they write about it. It's not my words. Unfortunately, in this regard, this high post, however more connected with ceremonial functions, is important, but I think we remember a lot of her quotes about 360-degree turn and many kilometers that separate countries in the world. But this year, in the year of the anniversary of victory over Nazism, the UN is headed by such a person. All of this, unfortunately, harms the image of the United Nations. But what's more important on its work, I'll tell you one more time.
The position of the President of the UN General Assembly is a ceremonial in nature. Usually it coordinates the work of the UN General Assembly. The powers are reflected in the UN Charter, so some restrictions will be placed on her work. People before her worked in that position for 8 years, and decisions that are being taken by the UN General Assembly, these are the decisions taken by the UN member states. But as for the mandate, it is restricted to 1 year. That's my answer to your question. Thank you, Ms. Zakharova. Moving on, Большая Asia, Greater Asia, please. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. Today we have one question for you. The Russian Foreign Ministry has been upholding the interests in Central Asia, but we see that China is gaining ground in this region. It's developing its own platform within the system of international affairs. Recently, they have published a draft agreement on forming and using the budget of the Central Asia-China Secretariat. Its summit is expected to take place this month in Astana. How this format is going to affect Russian interests in Central Asia, and how does it affect contacts between Moscow and Astana, Bishkek, Dushanbe, and Tashkent. Leaders of Russia and China during their talks in Moscow in May 2025 agreed to follow up on their efforts aimed at maintaining stability and gradual social and economic development in Central Asia region. This principled agreement is reflected in the joint statement made by Russian Federation and the Chinese People's Republic on further strengthening of relations of comprehensive partnership and strategic interaction made on May 8th. Russia is making its own significant contribution to this work by developing a stable, intensive bilateral, multilateral contact at the highest levels with our friends and allies in Central Asia. Despite a complicated geopolitical situation, we're actively developing our interaction in all areas, including trade, transportation, science, education, and culture. There is in these areas, Russia is one of the central and leading partners for Central Asian states, and of significant role is our mechanisms of CSTO, EU, CIS, SCO, as well as Russia Central Asia. And we're ready for the second summit in this format. Moscow.post, please. Yes, hello. We have only one question. Have we finished with the incident when Finland accused Russia of violating its airspace when two Russian military aircrafts violated its airspace in the end of May? And are there any mechanisms of interaction between Finland and Russia that will help to minimize similar incidents? We're exchanging notes with regard to this incident, and our countries carrying out all the necessary inspection activities, and we're exchanging information through the necessary diplomatic channels. We will also send the subsequent notes and provide information with the official explanations. Thank you. After E, please. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. So we have two questions for you. Given the recent events in the Middle East, does Russia view new opportunities for mediation between Iran and the United States so that we could renew an equitable balance of powers, given the fact that U.S. takes mediation efforts with regard to the settlement of the Ukrainian crisis? What initiatives are Russian diplomats ready to propose? We are concerned about the prospects of escalation of tensions around Iran, and that situation might turn into a full-fledged confrontation. We are reading statements made by Western officials that all of that is fraught with dire consequences for the Middle East and for the whole world at large. Moreover, given the global development of the global economy, unstable and smooth supplies of energy sources from the strategically important region of the Persian Gulf, sometimes you made that some responsible statements are made on striking nuclear facilities in Iran, that which could result into serious environmental consequences. It would I wouldn't like to speak on this topic, but since it's related with your question, it would affect the neighboring countries that have repeatedly voiced their concerns with regard to this issue. And given the interconnectedness and trade that is being developed between the countries in the region, it should be obvious to everyone that the settlement of the Iranian nuclear issue is only possible through diplomacy. We have certain hopes with the indirect dialogue being pursued between Washington and Tehran that could, if not raise the level of mutual trust, but could well, at least rule out a dangerous military scenario that will be dangerous for everyone. And I recall that Moscow is ready to facilitate both countries in achieving the mutually acceptable solutions. We highly value the positive assessments made by the government of Iran with regard to the contribution that our country could make in the negotiations between Iran and the United States. And it's true that our Iranian friends are also taking into account the experience of interaction that was developed during the implementation of the Iranian nuclear deal of 2015. How the Russian Foreign Ministry could assess the effectiveness of its information work of our country at the international stage, given the ongoing information wars and Russian media being blocked abroad. I believe that your question could result into writing a book or even writing an academic paper. We can speak so much about this issue. I can provide you so many facts, how mass media of Russia is building up its presence in various parts of the world, what persecutions and discrimination our journalists are dealing with. Probably you noticed that your colleague asked a question about the decision of the German authorities to obstruct the work of Russian journalists. I don't even know how to answer your question. I could be brief. I can say that Russian mass media and Russian journalists are doing their best when they are working under huge pressure, and they are doing their job. That's their calling. When countries, different countries, make them to stop working in this profession, when they're dealing with death threats, when they are added to sanction lists, but yet they're doing their job, whatever the circumstances are. Well, I can share information materials with you if you are writing a paper on that, and we can publish that later. As for how effective this work is, I think that these are the combined efforts made by Russian media outlets, by public figures and state figures of our country who speak at the international platforms on so many issues like traditional values, philosophy of the future, preserving civilizational achievements. I would look at this matter widely. The Russian voice is heard all over the globe, which makes our work effective and which inspires us to work hard in implementing our course. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have other questions? Any more? If there are no questions, then I thank you all and see you next time. Wish you well.